Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Traversi, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Public Policy Institute of California, I'm pleased to welcome you to the third event of our 2025 speaker series on California's future. The importance of civic knowledge, it's always been in my mind more of a truism than anything else. And just like your favorite truisms, you go along in life and think, well, there's nothing to discuss here, right? It's no issue. Civic knowledge is important, case closed. Just like the apple never falls far from the tree, and honesty is the best policy, and all that glitters is not gold. And what are the sub-truisms behind the importance of civic knowledge? Well, that it fosters a healthy democracy. It leads to an understanding of rights and responsibilities of citizens. It promotes civic engagement, develops key skills, and builds a strong society. But what happens when the perceived truth behind a truism fails? The possible results are cognitive dissonance and discomfort, negative emotional reactions, negative behavioral changes, the potential for misinformation and manipulation. In other words, it's a distinct point of vulnerability for society. And like any vulnerable point, it's also an opportunity for growth. And with that backdrop, we're going to hear today from a group of esteemed civic leaders about how we can work together to build civic knowledge in California today. Perhaps maybe a better term is rebuild civic knowledge in California, to pivot from vulnerability to opportunity. So we're delighted to present today's program featuring PPIC Survey Director Mark Baldassare, Assembly Member Jeff Gonzalez, 4th District Court of Appeal Administrative Presiding Justice, you'll be tested on this title later, Justice Judith McConnell, and Secretary of State Dr. Shirley Weber. Thank you to our panelists for being here with us today. Joining them is PPIC's President and CEO, Tani Cantil Sakaue. As many of you know, for the 12 years prior to her joining PPIC, Tani served as the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. She was also my law school classmate beginning, and I was going to say how many years ago, but we're not saying it. It was a couple decades ago. As you can tell, she's aging in reverse. I am not. This event is part of PPIC's 2025 Speaker Series on California's future. We'd like to thank the sponsors of this series for their underwriting support. Their support makes it possible for these events to be free and available to the public. These organizations are listed on the screens and on the program on your tables. This series is also funded by the PPIC Donor Circle and PPIC Corporate Circle, groups of individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. Please visit the PPIC website to find information on how you can join PPIC as a sponsor or donor. Before we begin, a few items to mention. For those of you who are not familiar with PPIC, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy research institute with offices in San Francisco and Sacramento. As a public charity, PPIC does not take or support positions on any ballot measures or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. At the end of today's program, there will be time to respond to audience questions. For those of us here in the room, those here in Sacramento, please raise your hand and PPIC staff will come to you with a microphone. For those of you joining us virtually, please send an email to ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. PPIC staff will be monitoring the questions that come in and incorporating them as much as we're able. Lastly, and this sounds like a Broadway pre-show announcement, if you haven't already, please silence your cell phone. And now on to the program. I'm pleased to turn it over to PPIC President and CEO Tani Cantil Sakaue.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David, and thank you for those inspiring words about building civic knowledge. And today we are blessed with a distinguished and extraordinary panel. And before I briefly introduce them, I do want to say, on behalf of PPIC, we thank you for being here. We thank you for your support and making this possible with our sponsors. Also, I just want to have a show of hands for all the folks here from PPIC in the audience, so that if you have a question or anything comes up, please feel free to contact any of these folks who are scattered throughout the audience, and we're really proud in welcoming you here. On your table, you will see our website, where you're able to find more information on our panelists. I will provide a brief introduction of them, very brief, since we want to get the most of them from our time together. I do want to do a special welcome to Mr. Paul Frank, a professor at Sacramento City College, who, as part of our Cal Civics initiative, has brought a number of community college students here from Sacramento City College and American River College, and one has brought her son, and so we please want you to wave at us so we know where you are, and we're grateful that you're here today. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our speakers, our panelists, as they are seated in alphabetical order. As I indicated, for more information about their impressive backgrounds, please go to our website. I'm going to start with my friend Mark Baldassare, who is Survey Director at PPIC, where he holds the R.J. and Francis Fearing Miller Chair in Public Policy. From 2007 to 2022, he sat in this seat. He served as president and CEO of PPIC. He is a leading expert on public opinion and survey methodology and has directed our statewide survey since 1998. Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Assembly Member Jeff Gonzalez, who represents District 36, which includes parts of Imperial and Riverside counties. He is a combat veteran, small business owner, pastor, and community leader. After 2 decades of service in the Marine Corps, he became a local pastor, motivated by the loss of 10 fellow Marines to suicide. Thank you, sir, for being here and your service. Another friend and colleague, I'd like to introduce Justice Judith McConnell. She is the administrative presiding justice of the 4th District Court of Appeal. She has held that position since 2003. Prior to that, she served for 23 years as a trial judge in San Diego County. Justice McConnell serves as chair of the Chief Justice's Civic Learning Initiative, known as the Power of Democracy. And for many years, she has led the branch-wide civic learning effort to improve the public's understanding of the courts. Thank you, Justice McConnell. Next, a woman who needs little recognition for her extremely extraordinary public service, Dr. Shirley Weber. She is the California Secretary of State. She has fought to secure and expand civil rights for all Californians. Before her appointment and election as the Secretary of State, Dr. Weber served 4 terms in the Assembly, representing California's 79th District. She has also served as a professor at San Diego State University, at Cal State University, Los Angeles, and Los Angeles City College. Welcome, Dr. Weber. It's an honor to have all of you. Thank you. My first question for all of you to think about, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Weber, is why is civic knowledge important, and what does it mean for the future of our state?
Well, I think probably more than ever, and thank you, and grateful to be with all the panelists here. I think more than any time ever, civic engagement, civic knowledge is critically important. Mainly because we have so many folks who don't know what it is, who have no idea why people are so enraged over what is happening in this country and the occupation of people, of states and cities around the nation, and what it means and what example it is in terms of the democracy that we have and how it operates on our behalf rather than otherwise. When you are civically engaged and you understand the rules and regulations that govern this country and that undergird the democracy that we have, you then know what to expect. And when I see folks agreeing to things that we know are not right, saying it's okay to incarcerate people who've never had a trial or never been to court, or to remove them without actually due process. It means they really don't understand this country. And having been a kid out of the pueblos, the projects of Los Angeles, sharecropper's daughter from Arkansas, I was taught the rules and regulations of this nation. I was taught what my rights were. I was taught how they were implemented and how I should fight for them. And when I talk to young people today about civic engagement and why things are important, what courts do, what a Secretary of State does, what the legislature should be concerned about, what should be happening in Washington, they don't really understand why we're so concerned about it and how it defines who they are and what they are going to do and what their future looks like. They have no idea of things that are happening on television that they're not a part of. And I've taken kids all over the world when I was at San Diego State, and they didn't understand what was happening in countries where they were being occupied. They had no idea that these were rights that people should have had that they have. And so therefore their ability to not only understand it, but to defend it and to implement it is very limited. And for me, that is frightening as we begin to talk about what they should know and what we should be demanding from each one of us. It's not about the elected officials, it's about the people who choose the elected officials, who set the standard. And our folks don't understand that. Our kids don't always understand it. So we've been spending a lot of time trying to make sure in the Secretary of State's office that our young people understand the voting rights. They think the voting rights gave Black people the right to vote. It did not. It ensured that they had the right to vote and ensured that there were no laws put in their place to keep them from implementing their right to vote. They have no idea what happened with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So that's why we have a whole program this summer to try to help not only young people, but adults as well. Remember the struggle to get the rights that you had and to maintain them. So when I think of civic engagement with young people, and we have a lot of programs that we're running now in our universities, our community colleges, to help people not just to register to vote, but to understand the process and understand what they're fighting for, what they should have in terms of their rights, how they should be protecting others. So this is a critical time when we are beginning to understand that in many ways, our system, our public system has failed our kids to teach them, to educate them. And this is not the first generation. So when I look at it and I see folks that are in their 40s and still don't understand what's going on, I realize that this has been a generational thing that has been missing. And yet when I was a kid in Los Angeles, in the public schools, my teachers made sure I knew that. They were teachers who had been brought in from Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, had been recruited into the inner city of Los Angeles. And we understood what was happening in terms of the various departments, whether the 3 branches of government. We understood the balance of power. We understood what happens when it's not there and how you implement it in terms of yourself and what you have to offer and what you're going to do and your responsibility to it. And that's been a long time ago, but those people, because they lived through the civil rights era, knew that understanding that and being committed to it was critically important. And we are not at a point where we must implement that for our children and for their families.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Same question to you, Justice McConnell. Why is civic knowledge important and what does it mean for our state?
Well, as you well know, when you became Chief Justice, you had girls in public school and you were concerned about the quality of the education they were receiving, particularly about the 3 branches of government, and asked me to head up a summit on civic learning, which we carried out. I think we had Sandra Day O'Connor here in Sacramento. We ended with a joint project with the Department of Education to study and make recommendations on civic learning, and established, and that came out with that report in 2014 about K-12 civic learning and what needs to be done. And mainly our big concern was the lack of familiarity or understanding of the 3 branches, particularly the courts. The people out there in the world don't understand the different roles. Now, it may well be that in current times, as Dr. Weber has pointed out, they're beginning to understand the role of courts in our democracy, because courts have been called upon to make tough decisions, as we always have been. And so the judicial branch decided to take an active role in educating our youth, particularly K-12, about the important role the courts play. Many people end up in court one way or the other. You're always going to be called for jury duty. I think one of my colleagues is on call right now for jury duty. You may get a traffic ticket, I hope not, but if you do, you may end up in traffic court. You may have to go through a family law court. So most Americans, as a witness, a party, a juror, or a voter, end up having to deal with the courts because we're all elected. The judges, state court judges are all elected. So we wanted to educate the public, and we've established some really wonderful programs to reach out to our youth. We have something called Judges in the Classroom, which links judges directly to schools, and it goes into the judges go into the classroom with programs. The curriculum's been vetted by educators, and so the teachers get, in a way, a day off because the judge comes in there and connects directly with the students. We have the Civic Learning Awards, which were started under your leadership, Chief Justice, and continuing, and we don't want to just criticize teachers, we want to praise those that are doing a good job. And in fact, there was a teacher in Brawley who, they got the top award early on because the teacher there was doing such a good job. Yay, Brawley, right? And we took the chief out to Brawley, and she said, I didn't know you could drive that far east and still be in California. Frankly, we take our court out to El Centro and Imperial and hold oral argument. We want to teach our youth about the courts and the role of courts in our democracy because it's a different undertaking. We're not majoritarian. We don't base our decisions just on the local prevailing winds. And we continue to do that. Now, our efforts now, we don't have funding anymore because of the state budget. So we don't anymore have a statewide steering committee. We have regional groups that meet periodically. And we're working very hard at reaching out to underserved communities because we think they particularly need us to enter into partnerships with the teachers, and the teachers are critical. And we're working now with iCivics, a program that was started many years ago by Sandra Day O'Connor when she was on the Supreme Court, or maybe right after she left. And it's a wonderful civic educational program, teaching teachers how to reach out to their students in a quality way to make them understand the importance of the three branches. And our partnership with iCivics has been supported by them, and we look forward to continuing our partnership. We're having 80 teachers come to a program in San Diego in June, and with judges, justices, and lawyers, bringing them together and talking with the teachers about the importance of civic learning and giving them tools to bring their work back to not only to their students, but to other teachers, because reaching out to teachers is really important. And over the years, we've spent a lot of time meeting with teachers, meeting with administrators. Anytime anyone wants us to come talk to them about a program, we're happy to do that. We're on call all the time. So, Chief, you started the ball rolling. Our current chief has carried on. And we look forward to continuing this important work.
Thank you. I know the audience is hearing about teaching students, teaching and helping teachers at K-12, in college, and beyond. So thank you for your work. Assemblymember, same question. Why is civic knowledge important, and what does it mean for the future of our state?
You know, the question is profound in itself, but I take the why. Right? Why? Why are we even up here? Why are you down there? Why are we even talking about this, right? So back when I was a preaching pastor, I was pastor by participation. So by a show of hands, right? Show of hands, if you were to go out into the desert right now with no tools in your hands, who can light a fire by themselves? Okay. A very small majority. That being said,
I'm impressed.
as everyone's like, oh no, where's he going to take us now, right? But that being said, That piece of why is someone had to teach someone else how to do that. Why? Because we had to cook our food. Why? So we can eat. So we can take care of our family, take care of our community. All these basic steps had to take place in order to get to the place of In-N-Out Burger. Right? We've gotten into this place of fast food knowledge, and we have forgotten the very basics in order to take care of our community. So the very basics of this question of why is this so important is because how can I care for my family if I cannot create the fire? How can I advocate for my community if I don't know, as these two dragon slayers next to me have so eloquently talked about, how can we advocate for ourselves and for those in our community if we don't know where to find the answers? My mother used to say, I'd say, hey mom, and she was a teacher, how do you spell hippopotamus? And she would say, I'm going to age myself here real quick, go look it up in the dictionary. And that wasn't on a phone, it was a book on a wall, on a shelf. And we'd have to find the answer. And it forced us in my house to understand that we had to research in order to gain that knowledge, in order to advocate for ourselves. So why is civic knowledge important? It's important because we have gotten into the fast food mentality of just give it to me on YouTube. Just give it to me on TikTok. I'll just learn it this way. And what we don't realize is that one person's viewpoint could be your own personal worldview that hasn't been researched. So civic knowledge is important because that's the basics of being your own advocate for your family, but most importantly, your own advocate for your community. As someone who served in 4 combat tours, I didn't just go out there willy-nilly and do what I had to do. I had to be a student of where I was going, a student of my peers, so that I could take care of them and they could take care of me and we could take care of the community that we were protecting. So I can't begin, we can go on all day onto the why of why it's so important. But let me close by saying this. Civic knowledge, your ability to tap into that and research it on your own, someone used to say knowledge is power. It's not the power that you can lord over someone, but it is the power that is within you that allows you to advocate for you and those around you. That's why civic knowledge is important.
Thank you for that very passionate and truly inspiring message about civics being teaches you the levers of power in all of your interactions in government to bring about change.
Well, any way I can bring up In-N-Out Burger, I always try.
You've got a lot of people thinking about that over their salad. So, Mark, same question to you. Why is civic knowledge important, and what does it mean for the future of our state?
Well, thank you for asking. And first, let me say it's an honor and a privilege to be on this stage with the leaders who are here. And I am truly inspired by the things you have to say. So for me, I was, in 2011, I went to meet George Shultz because somebody said, you know, Mark, it would be worthwhile for you to meet George Shultz. So off I went to his office at the Hoover Institute. And this was somebody who had served as Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Labor. And he said something to me that made a big impression. He said, Mark, it's really important to remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy is not a spectator sport. I know that I have my moments especially the last week when I think, no, it's not a spectator sport. You have to be involved. You have to be involved. And shortly after that meeting, and you brought up the summit that took place, Gary Hart, who was a member of the PPIC board, very involved in education for many years, had been the Secretary of Education for Gray Davis, said, Mark, I want you to go to this summit with me. And so it's like, okay, we'll go to the summit. And the summit involved the Chief Justice. The summit involved the Superintendent of Public Instruction talking about the importance of civics education. And I thought, wow, this really connects to that democracy is not a spectator sport idea. So from there, I thought, I want to meet the people who were involved in this, and I met with Tani when she was Chief Justice, asked her to take part in a program like this one, which we had with the Secretary of State at that time and the Chief Justice, who were both felt, this was Alex Padilla, and they spoke not just about the importance in the here and now, but what the importance of civics education had been in their lives and in their careers, much in the same way that George Schultz talked to me about what it meant for him and the path that he took. And it was really from that experience, which was 10 years ago on a stage in Los Angeles, that I really began to recognize for my own work in polling how important civics education is. Because if you think about the elections that we have in California, so in the last, since the pandemic, we've asked Californians to vote on roughly about 30 different state propositions, okay? So we're asking people to make decisions about whether or not to change certain public policies, right? And Secretary of State does a great job, offering information about that at the time of the elections. But these are big decisions that people are asked to make. Beyond that, people not so much anymore have to make the decision about whether to register or not, because we have automatic voter registration, thanks to some of the work that our Secretary of State and state government has done. Everybody is sent a ballot in the mail. But people have to make decisions about whether or not to send that ballot postage-free back in the mail, and have to understand that democracy is not a spectator sport, that they have a role to play in deciding who are the 120 state legislators they're going to be sending to Sacramento to represent them, the 52 members of Congress, the 2 U.S. senators, the statewide, from governor to Secretary of State to Superintendent of Public Instruction. They have big decisions to make. So where do the schools come in? So my colleague here, I was reading, Julian LaFortune has a paper that just came out. There are 5.8 million public school students in California. Think about that number for a minute. 5.8 million. Most of them are going to become voters in California. And most of our voters in the future are going to come from our public schools and our other schools in California. They're not going to come from out of state, most likely, like I did, voting in California. They're going to be coming from, they're going to be graduating from high school and making decisions about, first of all, whether to send that ballot in, and secondly, what they're going to decide in terms of either who's going to represent them or what decisions they're going to be making about public policy. So this is a very important group for us to be thinking about for their own well-being, but also for the well-being of the state, those 5.8 million public school students. So up until a few months ago, I had no idea, despite the fact that my background is in polling, I had no idea how people thought about this issue of civics education, because I didn't feel like I had the bandwidth to really write the questions and think about this. And so I asked our PPIC president, former Chief Justice, an expert, to work with me on 10 questions. That was a starting point. You know, it's a starting point to understanding how Californians feel about this issue of civics education. And one thing that's very important to understand is that an overwhelming majority of Californians say that this should be either a very high or a high priority for that students learning how to be engaged citizens should be a very high or high priority. Public school parents, 70% say this should be a very high or high priority of our schools. So getting that job done is something in which there's a great deal of public support for. And I would urge anybody who's either running for statewide office this year or thinking about it, to think about this from the standpoint also of that this is something the voters are telling us that they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. We appreciate those answers. And I also know that you, as an expert in direct democracy, have talked to me before about when we have in our hands these initiatives and we are the people who decide it, how critical it is to know civics and the levers of power, as Assemblymember Gonzalez has referred. Dr. Weber, we have some young people here, quite a few from a community college, and I know you've been working and accomplishing to increase and strengthen voting in our state. What's the connection between civic education for young people and their participation in voting over the course of their lives?
Well, I think, you know, it's interesting because a lot of it has changed over time, mainly because folks like things that are fast and quick and easy to do, and voting isn't always fast, easy, and quick. Occasionally it is. But we go to a lot of community colleges and we register students. We start pre-registering them when they're in high school. And then we invite them to participate in the voting system so they can work in the polls on the day of the election. We've discovered that when they do that and they're involved in high school, they are ecstatic about it. They're telling us about it. They love to do it. We then send them letters that says, now is your moment. You're 18. It's your time to vote. So we make sure we track them and keep them going. We've registered over 1 million high school students in the last few years at their high schools. Then we take them to the university, and every Cal State system, every CSU allows our students to register online when they're registering for classes. So they can register to vote there. They also have competition. We had over 200 and some odd campuses actually competing in a college bowl, a voting bowl that took place this past year. UC Santa Barbara won for the first time, and they were ecstatic that they won. They had students wrapped around the building registering the day of the election. And so they learned the value of registering in advance because they want to know why were they the only ones in line, because you registered the day of the election. Okay, so you have a special process. But what has happened is that we're trying to get our young people to understand that this is when you start. It's not when you get to be 20, 21, 18, 19. You learn the value of voting when you're young. And we saw young people going into these places working and seeing how difficult it was for folks to get to the polls, or what they were looking with or what they were dealing with in terms of figuring out how to use it. And it makes you a lifelong voter. What we're trying to help people understand is that I don't want to have to tell you every year that you need to go vote. I don't want to tell you that every year. I want you to learn it early so that it becomes a part of who you are and why you exist. And then you move from that to other levels of engagement. I had students who work on bills with me. We did several bills dealing with colleges and helping young people, helping our CSUs to basically have EBT cards so that our students could get their food at that particular time from that. And they learned, and we actually did bills and got them passed. And they're implemented in these colleges now. So we tell them, you know, the food bank you have in your college is because of the bill that I did with a bunch of other students. And so they begin to understand that they can take control of their existence at that particular point. I remind them the issue of power among young people, because they don't see it. I said, when you don't vote, it's not that your vote is just tossed into the sun somewhere and it lands anywhere. There are 10 of you in a room, and each one of you have 10% of the power. When you choose not to vote, now 9% of the people, nine people own the power, and their percentage has increased, and yours does not exist. And so what happens is you have given your power to someone who probably doesn't even like you, I tell the students. And they get enraged over that. I said, this person doesn't know you, don't like you, and they're gonna vote against you, okay? So you need to understand the power that you have and that it just doesn't go away. So we've spent time working with young people, helping them to understand that at this moment, they are developing a habit of voting, a pattern of voting when they vote at the university. And I also tell them about the fact that everybody keeps a record of your voting.
Yeah.
I said, and I asked them a question. You're a 5 out of 5 voter. What does that mean? I said, that means that every election that occurred, the last 5 elections, you were present. You voted. I said, which means if it's raining and storming, you're going to vote. If a person is a 1 out of 5, the sun could be shining, but if their girlfriend looked at them crooked, they're not going to vote, okay? Because anything will take them off of their dime where they are. And so we try to help them understand the power of that, because I want them to start feeling like I felt when I was a kid. My mother we had voting in our living room in South Central LA. They didn't have a place to vote, so my mother volunteered our home, and they voted in our living room. My dad turned the living room into a polling place, and that's where they voted till my mother passed away. And the interesting thing was, as a kid in middle school, I knew when every election was. I knew what my role was, to get up, get your own breakfast, and go down the driveway and walk to school, because important stuff was happening in the living room. And our home was a voting place, and there are 8 of us as kids, every last one of us vote in every election, and so do our children. Because we learned the power of it early in the game, not something that people had to remind me of, but I knew about it. And I knew what it meant, and I knew how proud my parents were. So I tell young people, go home, you register, bring your family with you to voting. Make sure they see you. Your children, even though we do vote by mail ballots now, my daughter, who's a senator, takes her 2 boys to turn in her ballot. She wants them to know where her vote went, so it's not just some nebulous experience. But we try to start early in the Secretary of State's office to help young people understand why they're voting, registering them at age 16 and 17, going to their schools to register them, my staff does, getting them engaged, sending them letters, keeping them involved, because we want them. I told them, this is something you're going to do your entire life. Whether you like who's running or not, this is your voice, this is what you do, and you do it all the time, every election, no matter how large, how small, this is your voice, this is who you are. And so we have spent our time in our office registering college students, registering high school students, getting whole families to go register to vote, because I want them to know that this is who you are. This is not something you're just doing because you don't have anything to do on Tuesdays, the first Tuesday of November. This is who you are. This is how you change your community. This is how you get things done. And we involve them in legislation, we involve them in other things so that they can see that their world changes when they get engaged.
So Dr. Weber, I appreciate that you are looking at that college students when you are saying that. And
yes.
Never else will you get this except at PPIC. I also happen to think you were fated to be the Secretary of State.
I'm sure my mother thought so.
You can see why she's so beloved in San Diego, can't you?
Yes, absolutely. Wow. So Justice McConnell, even before civics was on the tongues of most people, back in the early 2000s, maybe before that, you were a pioneer in civics because you came up with a recommendation that the judiciary should take control and start teaching civics in California. What do you see in your time over California as the most important gaps in civic knowledge today? And any recommendations to address them?
I think I mentioned earlier, the 3 branches have very different roles in our democracy. By the way, I have my Constitution with me. It's in my purse down there. Everyone should have a Constitution with them. Okay, so one of the things that is important, I think, is to teach people about the Constitution. And your survey, Mark, showed that was very important to the people you surveyed. And yet the top priority was basic skills. So what we need to do is put the Constitution into the reading classes. put the Constitution into the math classes, 12 jurors. How many jurors is 12? 6 and 6 is 12. Incorporate civic learning into all phases of those basic skills that are trained, kids are taught, they're required to learn. And I think that's one of the big pushes we need to make. And Dr. Weber talks a lot about the importance of voting, and one of the things that's very important is it's not just our statewide executive or our legislators, but our judges are voted into office. And none of us knows how to go out and campaign. Not at all. We can't fundraise. Most of us appear on a ballot, and nobody has a clue how to vote for judges. So part of what we decided we had to do is educate people about judges and how it's important to learn what judges do and teach them how the role of judges is so different from the other parts of our government and how we are constrained in what we can talk about. I can't talk about any case that's pending in front of a court. I can't talk about any case that's impending in front of a court. I can't talk about politics. I can talk about what I do as a judge, and that's kind of boring to most people. But we can talk about how important it is to learn what judges do. And that's, I think, a big challenge that we have ahead of us. We've had that challenge for many years, but some of the elections recently in other states have shown us how important it is that people learn about what their government does, including the judicial branch.
Thank you, Justice McConnell. Assemblymember Gonzalez, what do you wish more people and students knew about the work of the state legislature?
A number of meetings that we got to go to.
I'm going to scare them.
What I wish they knew, what a lot of people knew, is the work that goes into the idea of a bill, right? Just the mere idea of a bill. How that's formed, the process in which, by the way, my crack team is right here in front. They are amazing, and the amount of work that they have to do just to utilize the right words that are, as we like to say, fair to all concerned. We say that in Rotary. Just the words, just to get it on a piece of paper, and then add the legal stuff associated with that. It's not just words on a piece of paper, but it is a group, it's a collaborative effort of all bodies trying to, we say, form a more perfect union, right? In order to get something right, to find justice, to find a voice, whatever that path is. There's a lot that goes into it. But one of the things that I wish that people truly knew is the sacrifice of 250 years of an imperfect group of people trying to make it a little bit better each and every time. My friends died so that you have the ability to vote, right? Our friends throughout history have sacrificed so much so we could be here today, just to be able to talk like this. So that's what I wish they understood when they go out to vote and say, this is just not a check in a box. This is lives that have sacrificed, voices, mom going in and saying, no, we're gonna be in the living room and we're gonna do this because there's a purpose and there's a reason behind this. So that's what I wish people knew about the legislative process, is the sacrifice that was made and that will continue to be made so your voice is heard.
Important, critical reminder for all of us. Thank you, Assembly Member. Before we go to Q&A, Mark, you're going to get the last question.
Okay.
So one of the foundations of civic knowledge, as we talked about, and a key to laying the groundwork for lifelong engagement in political life is teaching young people, teaching them how government works and how to engage in the process for power, for leverage, for change. The question I have for you are, what are some more key takeaways from the PPIC statewide survey about how Californians view civic education?
Well, One of the comments that was made, I think it was important, and I want to put the survey in context. It was done in April, so it was after our last election, and in the context of everything that's going on at the federal and state level now. But the fact that Californians ranked the U.S. Constitution as the most important thing that we ought to be teaching in schools, I think is something that, and there was like 90% said that. There was like no disagreement. That's the most important thing. The next most important thing, which also an overwhelming number of Californians and public school parents said, was to make sure that we can teach our students how to gather information and how to sort out disinformation and misinformation from information today. And those are big tasks, but important tasks in our democracy at this moment, which is, again, not a spectator sport. Beyond that, there was also, and I think that this is something that could be accomplished in schools and needs to be accomplished more. We're seeing it today in this panel, the ability for people to express their political views with one another and to find ways to communicate what they have in common and what their differences are, is something that has been unfortunately lost in this moment in which we see so much polarization and an inability to again, beyond do we want to change people's minds, beyond that idea, just can we find ways to talk with each other? Can we find ways to communicate? Can our schools help us with exchanging, giving people the skills to express their views to others and not be afraid of that, as well as take in the views of others. So I would just leave you with those things that were absolutely high priorities for Californians today, and public school parents in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I know we've all taken away from this panel the importance and the power of civic knowledge, about learning how things work in order to use facts for policy in the legislature for all good, for that more perfect union, and that it starts well before you vote, and that it is something that really teaches the importance of the three branches of government, because each of them maintain their own level of authority and power, that also provides a check on each other. So we're at that point of our luncheon where we open up the audience to Q&A for the panelists. And when we send around our runners, we ask that you please state your name, and if you're with an organization, to please state your organization as well. And we also have an online audience, so there may or may not be questions from the online audience as well. But we're going to start our first question with the community college students. You get the first question. Please state your name. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Avril Amendola. I just finished my associates at Sacramento City College, and I'll be attending UC Davis in the fall. And my question for all of you, thank you. I'm actually here with my roommate who also is finishing her associates. All right, and going to UC Davis. But my question for you all is, how can we bridge the gap between online and some would say performative activism and actual policy influence within our young communities?
Great question. Who would like that?
Repeat the question.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
It wasn't clear to me.
Yeah, today we see a lot of young people, all of my peers, we see a lot of things posted on Instagram, but not a lot of actual influence and civic engagement, really. And so I was wondering, what would you suggest how can we help our peers begin to be truly involved in activism other than just on Instagram and Facebook and things like that?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, one of the first things you have to do is learn about what the issues are that are facing your community, and your community is obviously the student community, and what you care about, I guess, is what's happening on campus. So you want to find out what's happening on campus and who is making the decisions on campus. And if it's students, then you want to engage with the students that are making those decisions that affect everyone's lives. And influencing, I don't know, I'm not of that age that knows much about influence. I've read about it. But that's how you can make a difference, is get involved in what the issues are on your campus. Talk to the people who are involved in making the decisions. Look, I had a teacher in Brawley. I keep going back to Brawley. He took the city budget, gave it to his high school students, and said, look at this budget. It was only 80 pages long, not like what you have to deal with. And he said, and then go talk to somebody that works for the city. It could be a janitor, it could be a teacher, it could be a council member or the mayor, and find out what in that budget is important to them and why. And that's the kind of thing you do. And then they had to come back. And by the way, those students got so involved in their city government that one of them got their grandma elected to the city council, which I thought was pretty cool. But getting involved requires that you learn about what the issues are, what's important, and what is affecting people, then do something about it.
Excellent. Anne, you have a question?
Yes. Genoa Barrow with the Sacramento Observer. Dr. Weber has spoken about how her family's history in the South and the civil rights movement impacted the commitment to voting and change. How do you think what's going on right now, particularly in Los Angeles, will inspire young people to get involved for change?
Mm-hmm. Well, I lived through all of the riots of LA. Every last one of them. Watts riot was like a half a block from my house. So I'm very familiar with protest and unrest and so forth and so on. I think it's important that parents have conversations, particularly parents or grandparents who live through these things, have conversations with young people to help them understand what is taking place and what is the appropriate behavior, things that we should be concerned about, and have those conversations. Our young people are talking to people, but they're not talking always to people who know anything. I hate to say that, but they have
about to start preaching up in here.
I know they have lots of interaction, but they often don't sit down with folks who are old enough to remind them of what life is supposed to be like, what rights are there, what the issues are, and how to get things done other than just the way that folks see in the streets. And so it is really, really important that we as adults who have been through these things have this conversation and don't avoid any area. I sometimes find people don't want to talk about things in church when they should, because they have people with the experience of having lived through these things. They're the people who basically went to city council and got lights changed in the streets and did things at their schools with the PTA and all those other kinds of things. If we don't share this knowledge and experience we have, our kids have nothing to draw upon because there's so much coming at them in so many different ways that they don't have anyone to sit down and have a conversation with them. And, because I was at the university for 40 years, I always was used to having conversations with young people, and I still do, where the issues have come and there are organizations that I'm involved with or there are other kinds of church groups or what have you. I want them to know. I want them to have a perspective in which they can see the world. And we sometimes cut that off. We cut that knowledge off, and you'd be surprised how exciting kids get when they get some different information or they hear about what their grandparents did or their great-grandparents or things that we just kind of take for granted. And you then begin to understand that you stand in some amazing places in your life that are strong and that are persevering and that they have views of things that happen. And we have that responsibility to do that. And we can't just shuffle it off to the media, the press, and the social media, and and all those other acronyms and things that people give us. We have a responsibility to share that. And I find young people get inspired. You know, when I tell them the history of my family and sharecropping and so forth and so on, and my grandfather and my dad and how we came to California to avoid the Klan, they understand that and they're excited about it because they haven't met anybody else who had parents or grandparents like that before. And why this is so important to me when I see things taking place, we have to talk to our kids and our kids' friends and others. I used to, when my kids were young, I used to invite people over to my house for movies that were, you know, different kinds of movies for them to see, historical movies, and then have somebody there who lived through that era to talk to them about it. It was amazing how much they learned from realizing that history is in the book, but it's also sitting at the table. And that is critically important if we're going to do anything. As parents, a simple thing as helping your kids understand who they are, where they came from, where their neighbors are from, what their struggles about. It changes the world of young people to see reality in terms of what is there. And they spend an awful lot of time on phones, oh God, awful lot of times on video stuff, you know, it drives you crazy. But at the same time, you have to take some of that time and give them some real stuff.
Much appreciated. We have 2 questions. I'm going to go online first, and then Yancey.
Thanks, Tani. This comes from Cassandra Pai, who's president of Lucas Public Affairs and is also, of course, a member of the PPIC Board of Directors. And picking up on the survey findings, Cassandra writes, 70% of parents get it. What are the chances of mandating a single civics class in California elementary schools?
Mandating a civics class in schools. Just as,
Well, they're required to take government classes
Yeah.
in the, I think, 8th grade and 11th grade. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
We have Sarah here from. Yes, and so they are required to take government and learn about our government. It really ought to start earlier. It should start in kindergarten, in my view, and many teachers are into teaching about rules and the importance of rules and why we, as a community, have rules. So there are requirements for civic education.
Assemblymember Gonzalez, how about a mandate on civics education?
I think it is.
Additional on.
Could it be done? Sure. Should we do it is the question, right? That's really where I'm very much of the opinion that what is it that the people are really asking for, right? Are we missing a piece, a chapter in that, and all we have to do is add the chapter, right? Are we just missing that, or is it a whole curriculum? So I would really want to know. I'm not a fan of, hey, let's mandate first and then figure it out as we go. I'm a DMAIC principle type of person: define, measure, analyze, implement, and change. Let's define the problem. Let's measure it. Let's analyze it, so that if we do need to do that, what does that really look like, right? So, yes, mandate, but not really. Let's have more conversations about that.
Let's do some research and get some data.
So if I could just add one comment to this, the fact that so many people in California say this is important, this is a priority, speaks to me to the fact that this is worth doing. This is something that whether it's the members of the legislature or whether it's occurring at the school district level, this is something that, again, we have an election coming up next year. I would like to hear the candidates talk about these issues and what they're going to do.
Thank you, very interesting. Yancey, your questioner gets the floor, I think, and then that's our final question due to time.
My name is Ace Young, retired journalist, although when you're a journalist, I don't think you're ever retired. My question for you, there are 22 countries in this world where voting is mandatory, compulsory. In Australia, if you don't vote, you're fined $20. I guess my question for you all is, if we made voting mandatory, would it be serious enough for people to take the issues more seriously, and we would have better outcomes?
Yes, please.
I'm not a fan of mandatory voting. And let me explain why. Because I believe in your choice to do that or not. I would love if everyone voted, right? Every time, 5 out of 5, that would be great. But it's your country. It is your nation. So your level of engagement is really a personal piece. Yes, I believe we need to educate. Absolutely, 100%. I believe we need to use our peers to educate and maybe apply a little bit of that peer pressure in a good way, right? I believe in that. But to say you will be mandated to vote or fined, I'm not a fan of that, because that's just not what I believe is how this country was founded.
I think very thoughtful and wise words were said on this stage today by people who are experts in this field and who've not only demonstrated but lived the experience. I think they all deserve a true round of applause for their work and for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here. And because we are a data-based research institute, we will be sending a survey asking how we can do this better in the future. But thank you for coming out. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.